Hey everyone, Colin with Fly Route here, and this video today is going to cover the best app settings to use for your DJI Fly compatible drone via a checklist here. So definitely make sure you go down and get the checklist at the bottom of this video, download the PDF, print it out, hold on to it, hoping that it'll be a great resource for you. So there's a lot of settings within the app for your DJI drone, and over the last 5 years company-wide we've flown over 1,300 sporting events, and we've learned a lot about the best settings to use, what not to use, the do's and don'ts. So this video is going to cover specifically the drones that are compatible with DJI Fly, so you can reference that list here, but that will be drones like the Mavic 3 Classic, Mavic Air 2, Air 2S, drones like that. So if you do have an older model drone that's compatible with DJI Go 4, we also have a video that's set up for that with some slight variances. So feel free to reference that video for that content as well. So just getting into it, let's reference from the top down on the checklist and start working through the things that we need to. So go ahead and turn on your drone as well as your controller. We're using a smart controller here, but this will also apply to just a standard controller with a phone or tablet as well. So we're going to cover updating firmware, the video record settings. We're also going to touch on the safety, flight altitude, return to home settings, control settings that we like to use, as well as the HDMI output settings. So just starting at the top, we're going to make sure that we've got the latest firmware. So go ahead and select the meatball icon in the upper right hand and select About, and this will give you all of your updates. So we want to make sure we've got the latest before we fly. App firmware, aircraft firmware, controller firmware are the three things that we want to make sure that we've got. This isn't something you want to do out in the field. You definitely want to do this the night before, or as much time as possible. So moving on after the firmware, we'll go into the video record settings. So in the bottom right hand side, you'll see we've got 1080p 30 frames per second. That's going to be plenty of quality. Any more than that, it really bogs down the upload to online. We're also going to make sure that we've got, so moving on into our next settings, we're going to be going into the meatball menu, camera, and we've got MP4 selected. Most of these are going to be defaulted the way you need them, but we'll just highlight quickly. Colors, normal, coding, H.264, and moving along here, most of these are pretty much defaulted as is what we need. Don't need overexposure. One thing I will highlight is the grid lines are a great resource to have. It really helps you line up the framing properly. And I recommend doing the diagonal grid lines as well as the center point. It really just gives you that good reference point. White balance is auto. Moving on to the SD card, want to make sure that we've got that installed and SD card is selected here. And cache when recording, I recommend if you've got a smart controller just to have a spare SD card put in here. If there's anything faulty that occurs with the SD card on the drone itself, it's good just to have a backup. So moving on, that covers everything for our record settings. Let's move into the safety side of things. So let's click on safety from the meatball menu. We're going to make sure that we've got obstacle avoidance. Action is going to be brake. That way we're just, of course, it's not going to be off. And we don't want to bypass obstacles. Braking is the best thing to do. For return to home altitude, this is going to be dependent on the location that you're flying at. For most stadiums with the stadium lights, any goalpost uprights, trees, buildings, 200 feet's been more than enough for the majority of our locations that we fly at. Max altitude set to 400 feet. This is more of a Part 107 FAA requirement to not exceed 400 feet above ground level. So I just like to set that. Max distance, kind of up to you on what you like. Of course, visual line of sight is what's required, but 2,000 feet is what we've got here set for that. So that, and one more thing too, is we're looking at our safety settings. So we've got AirSense here under advanced safety settings. You turn that on for the ADS-B remote ID requirements there. So that will cover everything from the safety aspect. Moving on to the control settings, go ahead and select that. Units for US, of course, will be imperial, so you can select that. And then what we're going to want to go down to is going to be the gimbal mode. We'll want follow, not FPV, otherwise you'll get a really weird gimbal movement. Allow upward gimbal rotation. I like to enable that just in case you're doing any low flying, you need to pan up a little bit more. And if you go to advanced gimbal settings, do like to adjust the smoothness, pitch speed to 20, and that'll just ensure that we're not getting a lot of jerky motion as we're following the playing action. So that's going to get a really, really smooth and a clean shot. So that really concludes the majority of the settings I wanted to cover. Lastly, did want to just touch on the HDMI output settings. So if you do use a sideline replay system, this would be a consideration for you. Also, you would need a smart controller. So in order to check these settings, you're going to need to plug in an HDMI display, and that can go to like a computer monitor, just so otherwise you can't access the settings. You want to swipe down on your smart controller, hold down HDMI. We're looking at HDMI resolution. Most sideline replay systems accept a 720p feed, but occasionally some will accept a 1080p feed. So just consult with your sideline replay manufacturer and they'll get you the info on that. The last bit on here is the HDMI output mode. So just want to ensure that we've got camera view only selected. Otherwise, you'll get the whole heads up display pushing through on the sideline replay feed, which we don't want. So lastly, just wanted to close out with a few pro tips. If the application itself ever grays out, or if it crashes, which does happen. Number one, with a gray out, check your connections. If you're using a standard controller with a tablet or phone, the wiring may have fell loose. And then if the app crashes, but for both these scenarios, you'll be able to maintain control of the aircraft with the sticks. So don't feel like you need to land immediately or anything like that. The best thing to do after you check your connections is to restart the app. So just back out to the home page. You might have to hit back 3 times to this screen. Hit fly. Still maintain flight. And then the app will restart itself up, and you should get a refreshed video signal, and you'll be good to go from there on out. So that concludes the pro tips. Hope that this video was useful for you. If you do have any suggestions or things that we can add to help you along the journey, definitely comment below. Would love to help out as best we can. So with that, thanks so much for watching. Fly safe, film smooth, and have fun out there.